We will get started. Please be aware that this session will be recorded and made available through the website social media links to inform and educate the public on this topic. Throughout today's program, our speakers may ask you to unmute to answer or ask questions. Keeping that in mind, if you choose to participate in an identifiable way, you acknowledge that your image and/or name will be recorded and you're authorizing the use of your information in the recording as described. You have no obligation to appear or speak in the recording. You can turn off your video and participate under an alias should you wish to remain anonymous. The recording of today's workshop is protected by copyright law and is not to be copied. If you feel comfortable doing so, please turn your video on at this time. Welcome on behalf of the Wellness Alliance for Total Children's Health of Denton County, WATCH. I'm Rebecca DePeo-Krishner, an educational work group co-chair for the WATCH Coalition. It is our goal to organize opportunities for professionals and community members to learn about specific topics related to children's mental health and to learn about the resources available in our community. We have many people to thank for working collaboratively to put this event together. We'd like to thank members of our WATCH Coalition for planning and thinking through this program, Cook's Children's for providing the CEUs, and you, if you have attended our previous events, providing feedback. We planned this program with you in mind. We'd like to thank each of our speakers for giving their time and sharing their expertise with us today. With their permission, we have posted the slides from today on our website. We have a full agenda today, but we have scheduled a 15-minute break later in the program. We invite you to use this time during the break to chat with other attendees in the chat box. You can talk with the group as a whole or one-on-one by clicking on the button next to the to field in the chat feature. This is located just above where you type your message. We will also keep the meeting open for 10 minutes after the event from 11:50 to 12 o'clock, so you can continue to network, ask questions, and share information about your organization in the chat box. This time can also be used to complete the online evaluation for today's event. The evaluation link will be shared at the end of the program. All are encouraged to complete the evaluation as it is required to receive the continuing education credit. For your convenience, we have created a workshop meeting packet for you to use to follow along with today's presentation. You should have received an email from Eventbrite with the link to the workshop meeting packet. The packet can also be found on watchdenton.org under the Professionals tab. Click on the Wellness Workshop option and then the title of today's presentation. You will see a green button at the top of the page. You can click on that button to download the workshop meeting packet. If you need CEUs or a certificate of attendance, please make sure you have signed in. Later today, those who have signed in will receive an email with a link to fill out an online evaluation about today's workshop. You can print out your certificate later when it's convenient to you. You can also stay on the Zoom for 15 minutes after the event to fill out the evaluation. Today's speakers have no conflict of interest to report regarding today's presentation. And I would now like to introduce you to the chair of WATCH, Joshua Marshall, who would like to talk about the value we place on collaboration.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. Before we introduce our first speaker, I would like to share with you why we do what we do. In 2011, the WATCH Coalition was formed by a group of dedicated organizations and individuals who were committed to improving the total wellness of children and families in Denton County. Our vision is, because every child deserves hope, the Denton County community dedicates its unified resources to equip our children to reach their full potential mentally, physically, and socially to achieve their maximum personal success. One key strategy to achieve this goal is to maintain a diverse and active membership. We are a collaboration of both public and private organizations and individuals who are invested in the total wellness of Denton County's children. Our shared passion of improving children's mental health is the guidepost by which we base our choices. We understand the value of working together to improve children's mental health, and we are truly grateful for all of our members, volunteers, partners, and allies. Another strategy to achieve this goal is to maintain a website to serve the needs of families, health providers, and social service organizations. You can visit our website at www.watchdenton.org and share this resource with others. We regularly work to strengthen the network of mental health professionals by offering educational and networking opportunities related to children's mental health, just like this workshop. We also invite parents in our community who feel they might benefit from attending our workshops. If you are a parent attending today's workshop, thank you for coming, and please feel free to visit our website where you will find resources, information about community events, materials from past workshops, and more. I would like to thank Lori Holland and Rebecca DePeo-Christner, the Watch Education Work Group co-chairs, and the members of the Education Work Group for their work in planning this workshop. I can see by all of you who came today that this is a much needed topic for us to discuss. I'm now pleased to introduce our first speaker, Stephanie McCary, who we are thankful for sharing her time with us today. Stephanie McCary is a licensed professional counselor and registered play therapist. She is from Dallas, Texas, and currently owns and operates Tots and Teachers Counseling and Consultation Services, providing therapy for children as well as consultation and training for educators. Stephanie is a mental health clinician at a local preschool for children and families experiencing homelessness. She earned a bachelor's degree in political science from Dillard University in New Orleans and a master's in counseling from Southern Methodist University. I'll turn this now over to Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Joshua. I appreciate that. I'm so glad to be with everyone. I love the beautiful smiles. And I just want to say that I definitely do not need for your camera to be on. I love to see you. I love those beautiful faces, but I also understand today is Friday. And it has been a long week for myself too, working at a preschool. I'm just glad to be here. Happy Mental Health Awareness Month, everybody. If we have any educators online, happy Teacher Appreciation Week. We are so grateful for you and the work that you do. So I'm going to share my screen. Even though we're 3 years in this thing, something is going to go wrong. So just go ahead and just prepare for that. So I'm going to go ahead and get ready. And if you can see it, I want you to just say, give me a thumbs up, give me a heart or something, because that means I got it right. How we looking, friends? All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to talk about today. I know we have a lot of mental health professionals in the room, and parents. We have lots of people that will be joining us today. I love an interactive presentation. Myself and my partner, Patrick, who you're going to meet a little later on. A few times I'll ask you chat like you're doing right now, putting in yes, 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 and putting in different things so that we can stay connected to each other in this virtual presentation. So today we're going to talk about a tough topic. We're going to talk about adverse childhood experiences. And anytime we learn anything new, we are activating the stress response system. So the most responsible thing to do before we start to talk about something stressful is to go ahead and check in on our own nervous system. So I want to invite you to turn off your screen if you need to, so you can pay attention to my voice. And I just want you to breathe in and out. Don't focus too much on it. Don't try to change your breath. Just in and exhale, being grateful that we made it to the end of a week. Being mindful that we are making space to learn new information or to just be refreshed about information we may already know. So take an inhale. Take an exhale. And now I'm about to stress you out. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to stress you out. But I do hope that you learned something new today. And I chat, so I am going to make sure I'm pausing throughout our time today to see if there are any questions. So feel free to drop in any questions along or any amens. A question about that in the chat too. So let's look at what we're going to be talking about today. We are going to go on a journey over the next few hours. Myself, I'm going to walk you through just a basic understanding of adverse childhood experiences. And then my partner, Patrick, will come in and talk about resiliency as it relates to parents and building us up as caregivers. And then lastly, we'll talk about positive childhood experiences and what those look like. We talk a lot about ACEs, but we don't really focus on what are some things that could help buffer those ACEs and help to strengthen our outcomes, our outcomes. So that's our journey today. And so I want to get started. I love talking about ACEs and how it started because it reminds me of one of my favorite TV shows. So we're going to light up the chat for the first time. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being, I know absolutely nothing about adverse childhood experiences. I've never heard of it. What are you talking about? To 10 being Miss Stephanie. I'm going to say Miss Stephanie a lot because I work with little humans, but I'm talking Miss Stephanie. I know everything and I could possibly lead this presentation if I needed to. So on a scale of 1 to 10, Eileen's got a 7 in there. Go ahead and tell me where you are as it relates to ACEs. Oh, I love it. See why we say light up the chat? We got some 7s, some 8s, some 10s, some 4s. So we're all across the board. Some 6s, some 7s. Great. Right in the middle. Perfect. Perfect. Excellent. So Alicia, you are going to lead the rest of this presentation today. So we'll all, just kidding. You're doing good. Thank you, friends. So good, good. We got some 1s and 2s. We got everybody that's along that continuum today. So I want you to take the information that you're going to learn today, or that it's going to be a refresher, and connect it to where you are in your current job, right? Because the information may be the same, but where we are may switch it out. And just a friendly reminder to, as you come in, to put yourself on mute. Okay, so I share with you that I enjoy talking about the beginning of ACEs. Reminds me of one of my favorite television shows, Promise Me No Judgment. One of my favorite television shows is My 600-Pound Life, okay? Andrea, don't give me that face. That is one of my favorite shows. And that's kind of how this study started, right? If you have ever watched My 600-Pound Life, then you know who this wonderful man is. This is Dr. Now, and he helps people on their journey to losing weight. See, I have some people, thank you, Mona, who also love the show as well. So we know that this is Dr. Now. He is a great man who helps walk people through their weight loss journey. And if you watch the show, he is so straightforward. He is really concerned about not just the physical weight, but also the mental things that go on that are causing people to struggle with losing the weight. And so Dr. Now did not start the ACE study, but someone like Dr. Now did. It was Dr. Vincent Felitti. So Dr. Vincent was a doctor, kind of like Dr. Now, and was helping people with their weight loss journey. And he was helping them along their journey. He was noticing and got really curious about some of his most successful patients who were having trouble keeping the weight off. So they would lose the weight, but then something in their life would happen and it would all come back. And so he started asking questions. He started to ask different types of questions. And actually this study came about because of an accidental question that he asked. He meant to ask one of his patients, how old were you when you were first sexually active? And instead he asked, how much did you weigh? And she gave a response that alerted him that, whoa, this sounds a little, this is a red flag. This sounds like there have been some early sexual childhood abuse happening. And so he asked more and more of his patients and started to realize, oh my goodness, just like on 600-Pound Life, most of my most successful patients who are struggling with keeping this weight off, or who are struggling, they get to a point, something happens, it triggers an emotion. They all are coming to me and saying they have had some type of childhood trauma in their life that they are not aware of, or not aware of until I, Dr. Vincent Felitti, have asked them this question. So Dr. Vincent Felitti wanted to take this to the national stage. He wanted to get more research about this and figure out, how prevalent is this? You know, is this just happening to me in my little clinic, or is this happening all over? So he decided to partner with Dr. Robert Anda, or Anda, however he chooses to pronounce his beautiful name. He decided to partner with him. And so Dr. Vincent Felitti, who has this obesity clinic, and Dr. Robert Anda, they're working together. And in between 1995 and 1997, they end up doing a research study with over 17,000 people at Kaiser Permanente to do this, to participate in this study. They gave them a questionnaire. They listed, we're going to look at the 10 ACEs that they listed. And they wanted to know, okay, let's see how prevalent this is. Let's see what happens when we correlate this ACE score to health risk later on and down in life. So they gave them the questionnaires and they answered these questions. So here's the list. You guys have seen this before. The list of the 10 ACEs that they found, right? So these are the questions that they asked. They looked at physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual, physical neglect, emotional neglect, and then household dysfunction, mental illness, incarcerated relative, a mother violently, substance abuse, divorce. So they asked people through this question just to say, have you experienced any of these things before the age of 18? So however many of these things you were able to check off, that was your ACE score. That's how they developed that score. So using the data from that, the questionnaires and the medical eval, then Felitti and Anda correlated those ACE scores with health risk behaviors and outcomes. And so there were lots of findings that help guide a lot of our work today. So a lot of you that are in the 8s and the 9s that you dropped into the chat, I'm sure that you know a lot about the ACE study, and what you've learned from the ACE study is guiding the work that you do. So let's look at some of those findings, okay? So the first finding was that ACEs are common. So I'm sure as you were looking through those 10, in your head, you're like, well, yep, I've experienced that. Yeah, that one too. Same for me. I could name at least 3 or 4 of those that I experienced. So in the study, they realized that, you know what, ACEs are common, they are prevalent. Nearly 2/3 of the participants, so about 64% of adults, have at least one ACE, okay? The second finding is can cause the onset of chronic disease. So we're talking about cancer, heart disease, as well as mental illnesses. It can also heighten the risk of one being involved in a victim of domestic violence. And we're going to walk through what that looks like and how that makes sense. Because I remember when I first learned about ACEs, I was like, I don't get it. I don't understand how that's connected. So we'll walk through that with a little kind of case study in just a second. So ACEs are prevalent. They're common. We've all experienced at least one, about 64% of us. A lot of people like to call ACEs the great equalizer. So right now we are talking across race, we are talking across gender, that people have experienced before the age of 18, about 64% of us, more than about one ACE. They can cause the onset of chronic disease, meaning they can affect us physiologically. The next finding is the adverse childhood experiences, they do not occur alone. They don't happen by themselves. The research shows that if you have one, then there's an 80% chance that you're gonna have 2 or that you do have 2 or more. And so I like to pause here again. So for some of us who are just learning about ACEs, or who are new to have childhood experiences, then this is where that part of our brain starts to kick in around, wait a minute, what are you saying? What's going on? So I want you to pause, use your breath as grounding as we go through this presentation, to say, okay, I'm learning new information, and the research is just the research. The rest of today, we're going to talk about where the hope lies. So remember, there's always some hope. I'm going to walk through some of these tough findings first. So again, ACEs do not occur alone. If you have one, there's that 87% chance that you have 2 or more. Another finding is that there is a dose-response relationship. So the more ACEs you have, then the greater risk you are for chronic disease. It doesn't mean you're going to have chronic disease. It just means that there's a greater risk for chronic disease, mental illness, again, victim of violence, and committing violence. People who have an ACE score, they usually have that ACE score between 0 to 10, right? And each type of trauma counts as 1, no matter how many times it occurs, right? So each type of trauma kind of counts as that 1. And I like to think of it like as your cholesterol trauma. Like a lot of us work with children, so that ACE score is kind of like a cholesterol score. And so people with an ACE score of 4 or more, and this was a surprising outcome to me or finding, people with an ACE score of 4 or more are twice as likely to become smokers, or even 7 times more likely to become alcoholics. Again, this is another one of those moments where I start thinking like, oh goodness, I wonder what happened. I've had 4 or more or 3 or more. I haven't become a smoker, or I do know people who have become. I know when I talk about this to some of my family members, they're like, oh, okay. So that's starting to make a little sense to why some generational curses or things like that kind of continue to happen. Right. So an ACE score of 4 or more, twice as likely to be smokers, 7 times or more likely to be alcoholic. Having an ACE score of 4 increases the risk of emphysema, which I'm sure you can get the connection. If we are twice as likely more to be a smoker, then that's going to increase our risk of having those health challenges like emphysema or chronic bronchitis by nearly 400%. People with high ACE scores, again, are more likely to become violent in their lives. A lot of us who work with children. So another finding is ACEs contribute, this was an interesting one to me, to most of our social and economical health issues. ACEs are responsible for a big chunk of workplace absenteeism. Think about the effect that toxic stress, the effect that cortisol can have on us, triggers that can happen, especially when we are going through, and still are going through a pandemic, and we're going to walk through that a little bit more. But ACEs do contribute to a lot of our social and economical health issues, including workplace absenteeism, the cost of healthcare, response, the mental health, and the criminal justice system. So it's very interesting to me that the 5th major chronic mental health, economic health, and social health issues are one of the findings that were not in the original study, but there are organizations like ACEs Too High that are adding on to the different findings and understanding that not only are they common, not only do they cause an onset of chronic disease, that they don't occur alone, but they are connecting to a lot of our social and economical health issues. And lastly, the finding is all ACEs can cause toxic stress. So I've had questions around, does it matter which ACE that I've experienced, whether it be neglect or abuse? It matter, right? Our brain cannot distinguish one type of toxic stress from another. Toxic stress is toxic stress. So there are 3 types of stress, right? We have positive stress, toxic stress, and tolerable stress. Now, positive stress is something like, you guys, when we were asking, someone asked how we were feeling, everybody was saying excited, maybe a little tired, maybe a little exhausted. Positive stress is what I was experiencing, getting ready for this presentation. I'm excited, but I'm also a little stressed out, right? So that cortisol is going, that adrenaline is going, but it's a happy moment, like planning for a wedding. Tolerable stress, the screen just went blank, right? So it's no longer positive, but now it's like, oh goodness, my whole internet just went down. But it didn't last long, so it was tolerable. But toxic stress is when that cortisol in our body, the stress hormone, that cortisol faucet is being turned on for too long. It's the prolonged stress. So all ACEs, those 10, can cause toxic stress, no matter which one we're looking at. So before we look at the ACE pyramid, I wanted to check and pause and see, are there any questions or anything that anybody is currently thinking about or that has popped out to them? So I'll leave the chat open for that. If you have any, I'll keep my eyes open. Yes, I can definitely go over the fourth one. Thank you for asking that. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so the fourth one again is that there is a dose response relationship. So the more ACEs that you experience, the higher at risk you are for lifelong health challenges. So if you've experienced one ACE, then there is a certain percentage of effects that you could have with long-term health. 2 ACEs, then it goes up. 3 ACEs, then it continues to increase. So there is this dose response relationship of however many ACEs that you have experienced, it increases your risk of lifelong health challenges. And so that's mental health challenges, physical health challenges, and social. Now, again, remember, we're going to talk about the hope in that isn't a predestined trajectory. This doesn't mean that because I've experienced these 3 ACEs, then it is predestined that I am going to have heart disease. That is not what that means. So I hope that kind of makes sense to what that dose response relationship. If it doesn't, let me know and we can kind of dive a little deeper. Okay, anytime. So let's the pyramid, and you can see my little stick person there. I tried, y'all. This isn't my my clip art isn't, Canva didn't have a really good one. All right, so let's look at the ACE. So from the findings, then they created this pyramid that kind of shows that trajectory as you see the bottom, adverse childhood experiences. So you're probably wondering, how is all this possible? How does early childhood trauma affect our physical health? So we're going to walk up this ACE pyramid, and we talked about cortisol. I have that word on the side here because we want to keep that in mind as the stress hormone that is secreted through our body when we do experience positive stress, tolerable stress, or toxic stress. Okay, so I have a little girl here on this side. Her name is Samantha. Hey, Samantha, how are you doing? Samantha is, let's say she's about 5 years old. And let's say so far, and this is a lot of the children that I work with, score of 5. So using the original 10, all right? We're going to talk more about expanded ACEs a little later on, but using the original 10 ACEs, let's say Samantha has 5. She grew up in a home with domestic violence, both physical and emotional abuse from both parents. Because of this, Samantha's mother was rated for drug abuse, and her parents divorced, and all of this has happened before the age of 7. Okay, so we know a lot about brain development, and we know what happens within those important first 3 years of life. So she's experienced those ACEs that we named all before the age of 7. And we know there's a critical boost of brain, that pruning that is happening, those neurons wiring and firing together during those ages. But when you're experiencing that and that toxic stress is happening at the same time that is happening, then we're moving up that pyramid to some disrupted neurodevelopment. Things aren't wiring and firing as they should because of this childhood trauma that she is currently experiencing home before the age of 7. So she has her ACEs. Because of ACEs and because of the way that toxic stress impacts the brain, we have some disrupted neurodevelopment. Because we have some disrupted neurodevelopment, Samantha struggles with making friends. Samantha struggles with being in class and sitting still. Because of the effects of trauma, we know that trauma can cause a lot of our kiddos as well as our teenagers to be hypervigilant, right? Perceiving things as threat that may not be a threat. Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, the author of The Deepest Well, which is an amazing book, talks about the bear in the forest, that if there's a bear in the forest, you want to be scared, you want to be able to protect yourself. But what happens when you're in the classroom and Samantha's perceiving that there's threat, that the bear is in the classroom, right? So that's causing her to have some social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. She's isolated, There are no buffers at this time. She doesn't feel like she belongs in her room. As she moves up to middle school, she's really not feeling like she belongs, doesn't know how to make friends. So instead, she adopts some health risk behaviors. Because she doesn't feel like she fits in school, Samantha's going to go find somewhere where she feels like she fits in. She's going to go find a group that she feels like accepts her and makes her feel like she belongs. And this may not be a positive peer social group. So let's say she has joined this group that is not positive. And because she hasn't joined this group, all from the need of wanting to be accepted and felt like she belonged, then she's adopted these high-risk behaviors, whether that be drinking, whether that be smoking, whatever these things are, those behaviors. And she's growing, she's in middle school, she's in high school, and she's been drinking and doing these things for a while, which have had a toll on her body, which may have caused her liver to be out of whack a little bit if she's continuing to smoke and continuing to drink, which will then inevitably lead to an early death. Now that sounds harsh, but I want you to look at the pyramid. And if you see the pyramid, in between each one of these green boxes, you see some white space, right? And later on, we're going to talk about how we can feel some of that white space, because this is not a predestined trajectory. Samantha does not have to go up pyramid, but this is what it looks like according to the ACE study. If there are no buffers, if there is no support, and if a child does experience adverse childhood experiences. So I'm sure with story, if you work with children, this story doesn't seem too far out of whack. You may know some children that you've worked with, or still to this day are working with some of those children. But we want to put a pin here at Samantha. So we've looked at the ACE pyramid, we've looked at the trajectory. Now let's go back to the study and look at who the participants were. We want to dive a little deeper. When Dr. Vincent Felitti and Dr. Anda did this study, who did they do the study on, right? Who were these participants? 4% of the participants were female that they did the original ACE study on. 75% of the participants were white. 46% of the participants were over the age of 60, and 75% had at least some college experience. So when you hear that, and we see what the findings are, what connections are you making? I'm curious to know. I see some stuff in the chat. What are you thinking about? We see that we have these findings. What kind of pops out to you once we know who the study participants are? They were mostly white, middle, and upper class. And most of them, because they were members of Kaiser Permanente, had some health insurance. Exactly, Tina. Not a study. This isn't a representative sample of the population. Not a good representation. Yeah. It isn't diverse. Exactly. So let's go back to a pyramid. All right, let's go back to that pyramid. And let's say, we got another stick person here. This time we're working with JT. All right. JT is a Black male. All right. And his story is exactly like Samantha's, but we have something to add to his story. So what happens when we add on generational trauma, historical trauma, the effects of slavery, the effects of systemic oppression, the effects of being a person of color in America, and those things kind of passing down through the line, because our body does keep the score. Also another amazing book to read. So let's say JT, or he was Hispanic, right? And we think about other indigenous cultures. And we think about the traumatic journeys that it takes to immigrate sometimes to this country. So not only does JT have that exact same story as Samantha, but he's a part of our Black, Indigenous, or people of color. Or with the different type of diversity. We have, not only do we have sex and gender, all of those different types of diversity. But let's say not only is JT a person of color, but he is also living in poverty, right? So same story as Samantha, but we have two extra layers at the bottom. We have generational embodiment and historical trauma, and now we have a social conditions and local context. Now, the thing to be curious about or to think about is the two at the bottom can impact JT even before he's born. Before he's born, he could be a part of a population that has experienced historical trauma. He can be born into, like many of the children that I work with who are homeless, who are experiencing homelessness, before they even get to experiencing any ACEs. Because of this, the ACE study has expanded it, and it looks different, and it takes into account people who have experienced poverty as well as those who are a part of different populations. Now we're going to take a few look at a few different variations. What I love about the ACE study, people have expanded it out because so many things have changed. The world is continuing to grow. We're going to look at how this has expanded. But one thing I want you to know before I move on, again, I want to say this as many times as I can, that this is not a predestined path. It is not a predestined path. And with the right buffers, with the right support, with positive childhood experiences that Patrick's going to talk about later, it just means that you are more, or our children are more at risk. But there is hope. There is absolutely hope, because each of one of you are on the screen today. There is definitely hope. And something that Dr. Bruce Perry says that sticks with me all the time is that what's predictable is preventable. Now, he doesn't mean that we can prevent ACEs from happening, but what research does is lets us know, okay, we can predict that this is a reality. But since we can predict this, what are some things we can do to help prevent what's happening? So going back to asking that question, instead of asking what's wrong with JT or what's happening, what's wrong with Samantha, asking what happened. And am I making sure to bring in all the different context of the things that happen? Exactly, Rebecca. The stress his mother felt during pregnancy can surely affect his prenatal brain development. So going right back up to that disrupted neurodevelopment. So even better with expanding the ACEs. So let's look at the pair of ACEs, right? This is one that I love to see. So not only do we have those original 10, this tree that was brought on by the Building Community Resilience model, it takes into account the ACEs seen and unseen. So you see at the top, the ACEs are at the top. Then you see at the bottom, adverse community environments. So in Dallas, I know it may be a little different in Denton County, but the Child Poverty Action Lab in Dallas now reports that 1 in 3 children are currently living in poverty. 5 years ago, it was 1 in 5. Now we're at 1 in 3. So we have the pair of ACEs at the top. At the bottom, we have adverse community environments. So we have ACEs, 2 pair of ACEs, the childhood environments and the community, the childhood experiences and the community environments. Bottom, we're looking at poverty, discrimination, community disruption, lack of opportunity, economic mobility and social capita, poor housing, quality and affordability, and violence. So these are the unseen roots of ACEs, that pair of ACEs. And so I'm sure some of you may have seen this before. And so we want to look at, they've expanded it even more. So we got the ACEs at the top, we have the adverse community environments at the bottom, affecting our children, and that are affecting the way that they show up in life, the way that they show up in our offices and in the classrooms. And a part of my private practice, working with educators, understanding that our educators are these children grown up. Some of them are. They are the children who have experienced adverse childhood experiences, who have experienced adverse community experiences, environments, or who have lived in adverse community environments and need that same support as they work with the children that they serve. So let's another expand it. We have a pair of ACEs here, but then now we have the 3 realms of ACEs. Now this is probably kind of hard to see, but if you have the slides, you can kind of look a little closer to that. This brings it right at home for us. Number 1, those are the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences that we talked about earlier that are in the original study. Number 2, we have the adverse community environments. They've even added a couple of more: historical trauma, structural racism, poor water and air quality, substandard schools, lack of job opportunities. But now we have number 3, environments. Right? We have a climate crisis, natural disasters, earthquakes, a pandemic, right? So we have these 3 realms of ACEs. And so when we hear people say, you know what, we're all in the same boat, that is absolutely not true. We may all be in the same water, but some of our boats have holes in them, right? And we're not all experiencing it the same way. So when we look at these 3 ACEs, we think about what is it that is affecting our children? What is it that is affecting us as carers, as mental health practitioners? How are we understanding behavior as communication? And how are we chasing that why to say, I wonder what happened. What kind of environment are we living in? How can we support? So the Center for Disease Control, I want to pause here again. I know we're moving kind of fast. I want to pause here again to see if there are any questions, anything that's popping out. I invite you to come off of the mic a little bit. If there's anything that is kind of an aha moment to you now, or something that you're like, you know what, I didn't think about that, but now I am starting to think and wonder. I wanted to spend some time to see if anybody had any wonderings, thoughts, or aha moments. Are there any studies that talk about what age is the most traumatic when these things happen? Yes, Rachel. And so I would follow the work of Dr. Bruce Perry because he talks a lot about experiencing traumatic events between the time when the brain is doing the most wiring and firing. So for example, I work with children from the age of 2 years old until the age of 5 years old. Every single child that I work with is experiencing homelessness. And so his work talks about these sensitive periods of brain development and when trauma happens during those sensitive periods, because as we grow, our brains are pruning things that we no longer use, right? And so if we are seeing trauma during those most sensitive periods of brain development, then it's going to rewire the way that we understand things, the way that we communicate, the way that we are able to regulate ourselves, or the way we are able to co-regulate others. So there is lots of research and understanding around when trauma happens, because that's a big piece in the book that him and Oprah wrote. Yes, that's it, Ashley. Thank you so much. What happened to you? That's the book. Yep. Yes, Alicia, I see a lot of people are appreciating as much as I was, how we continue to expand the ACEs, right? As we continue to say, you know, there are others that are affecting the way that our children are able to show up. There are other things that they are bringing with them in what I like to call their invisible backpacks as they walk into school with us, that we want to be aware of and that we want to be mindful of. And we know through of brain science and brain development, we understand that our brain, there's neuroplasticity, right? That our brain can change and that it can grow. So even though that there is research around trauma happening between those sensitive periods of life, there's also research around the importance of early intervention. So when you're able to intervene early, when you and at the beginning, oh, this child or this family has experienced this many ACEs, we are going to intervene as early as possible because it's a little easier to rewire the brain at the early age, right? So the children that I currently work with in play therapy, as well as in the preschool, that during that age, we're able to rewire, we're able to buffer, we're able to build resilience in the families, as well as make people more aware of what their behavior is communicating as it relates to their traumatic or childhood traumatic experiences. So there's kind of a two-prong to that of early childhood trauma. Yes, it can affect them at a greater rate, but that early intervention, just like with academics, if you get it started early, if we understand that a child needs speech therapy, occupational therapy, or physical therapy at an early age, then we can get them set on the right path. The exact same thing for mental health, right? So if we are noticing that a child is struggling with dysregulatory behaviors, we're noticing that they are anxious at 3 and 4 years old and not waiting to say, you know what, once they get into elementary school or kindergarten, we'll get them set up with a therapist. But by that time, the way that our kind of world works, and we think about the research around how children and of color are seen and presented, there's research around the 3 Bs. So for children who are bigger for their age, for children who are Black, and for boys, right? So bigger, Black, and boys, there is research around adultification, right? And seeing them as older than their age, and there being a connection to more suspensions, more exclusionary practices. So understanding these early adverse childhood experiences and intervening early is very, very important. Exactly, Don, yes. My passion is the working with the teachers. So I think it's very important. Okay, so I would like to show you from the Center of Disease Control as we prepare to go into our next section of the day. Thank you guys for your feedback. I really appreciate it. I wanted to show you this video from the CDC about the path forward. And I want to think about your role as we are going through the next chapter, because we all play an important part of not only understanding adverse childhood experiences, not just the original 10, but the expanded versions of them. Then where does the hope lie? How do we make sure that our children, our educators, that we are doing as much as we can to buffer against the toxic effects of adverse childhood experiences? So I want to play this video for you. I want to make sure my sound. Okay. Alyssa, you've done a great job. Can you give me a thumbs? You cannot hear the sound. Okay.
Hi, this is my neighborhood. I grew up in this building. This is a great community now, but it's had its share of problems. When I was a kid, our community had high unemployment, a lack of resources for families, and lots of kids hanging out with no adult supervision. You might have heard about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs are traumatic events in childhood, like abuse and neglect, that can increase risk for future problems. But they don't have to. The good news is that ACEs and their consequences can be prevented. Take me, for example. I was at risk for ACEs, and despite all the things that put me at risk, some pretty incredible people helped make sure that I wouldn't become another statistic. Come on, I'll show you around. That's Jackson. He's a cool kid. His dad left when he was 2, and his mom works 2 jobs. I hang out with him every Thursday night and help him with his homework. Sometimes we grab ice cream. It's fun. Plus, he has another adult role model to learn from and trust. That's Mr. Martino. When I was a kid, he let me help him at the store sometimes after school when my parents were working late. He did that for a bunch of us. My dad actually found his job as a mechanic because of Mr. Martino. This helped our family in so many ways. Not only did my dad have a steady paycheck, which eased his stress about paying rent and buying necessities like food and clothes, but he was also a lot nicer to me, my brother, and my mom once he started working a job that made him feel good about himself. When communities come together, they can do so much to prevent ACEs. Mr. Martino and other local business owners put together a series of career workshops to help people like my dad find work. My mom also got a job with a company that allowed her to work from home and spend more time with me and my brother. Mariana has just gotten out of a class about handling challenges of single parenting. The clinic offers free childcare so Mariana's daughter, Ella, can play while Mariana's in class. The class helps parents like Mariana develop positive parenting skills, not just for babies and toddlers, but for teenagers too. This is another way our community has come together to give families the resources they need, and just one more way to prevent ACEs. This was my school, Riverside Middle, right in the heart of town. These kids are here for a sponsored summer camp. This community-supported program helps families with affordable, quality childcare and helps kids get tutoring and learn life skills. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time at this school all year long. There was one counselor, Miss Greer, who I remember more than anyone. She was a really good listener. Miss Greer helped me and my brother get involved in after-school activities like baseball and soccer. Our coaches were super nice and were mentors to us. Staying after school for practice kept us and a lot of other kids out of trouble. When schools help take responsibility for preventing ACEs, everybody wins. My life could have gone in a completely different direction. Studies show that ACEs can have long-term negative effects on kids' health and well-being that may last into adulthood and even continue in future generations. But by people and groups taking action, ACEs can be prevented. In fact, there are 5 known strategies that help stop ACEs before they even start. You can implement them in your own community, just like we did. How? By strengthening economic support for families, by changing social norms to support parents in positive parenting, by providing quality care and education early in life, by enhancing parenting skills to promote healthy child development, and by intervening to lessen harms and prevent future risk. So, now you know my story, and you've seen the prevention strategies in my community that helped me beat the odds. I had healthy relationships with my family and friends. I learned how to take care of myself and make good choices. And today, I'm a mentor to other kids who need some extra help so they don't become an ACEs statistic. Safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments are essential to prevent child abuse and neglect and to assure that all kids reach their full potential. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Banana split? You got it.
I love that video. And yes, she said it will be available. Right. And so I see you guys, Rebecca, I love that poem. Thank you so much for putting that in the chat. Just kind of wraps it all up and speaks to us understanding that everything that our children do or our adults do when it comes to their behavior is communication. It's letting us know something, it's letting us know that something is needed, support is needed, and us understanding the effects that toxic stress can have on the brain and the body, especially of our younger children, as well as our adults and our educators, understanding that ACEs are very prevalent. When we think about the social emotional learning craze and all of that that's happening right now, and we think about the prevalency of adverse childhood experiences, adverse community experiences, environmental experiences, like the pandemic, then we are safe with understanding that if we treat everyone and understand that everyone has experienced something, as long as the ACEs expand themselves, then we know that we can continue to grow and have empathy in our work, have gratitude and compassion for ourselves, because understanding that we have experienced ACEs in our lives, that the behaviors that we communicate can be connected to some of those ACEs and traumatic experience that we may have experienced, and having some compassion for ourselves so that we can continue to hold the light for others in our work, whether it be our own children, whether it be the students that we work with, whether it be our therapy clients. It's important, and Dr. Bruce Perry talks a lot about the research around safe relationships and building relationships, and how that can be like bubble wrap. I can't stop the ACEs from happening, unfortunately. A lot of the kids that I see every day, I wish I could say, man, I wish you were not experiencing homelessness. I wish you did not live in a shelter. But I have to tell you, and this may be the same with most of you, that many of the children that I work with are very unaware of the situation that they're in. They know what it feels like. But I've never had a child say to me, I'm homeless, Miss Stephanie. But what I have had a child say to me, and this happened 2 weeks ago when we were doing our small group, he was 5 years old, and he asked me a question. He said, Miss Stephanie, do you have gas? And of course, in my head, I was like, what? I was a little confused. And so I asked him, I said, so are you meaning in my car or in my body? And he said, in your car. And I said, well, yeah, I have gas in my car. And then he said, well, we don't have gas. And he didn't say it in a way that it was like, we don't have gas. He said it in a way of, I am trying to understand where I am, what is happening to me that is different from what's happening in the world, and how do I take that as making sense of what's around me and what supports are around me. And so I shared with him when he said, we don't have gas. And he had his little fingers up. We just have a little bit of gas. And I say, yeah, sometimes that can be really tough and it can make it hard for us to get to school. But I'm so happy to see you when you get here. And he just went, okay, and went straight into our sensory room. But it's in those moments when at a young age, they may not know, and they don't know. These are 10 ACEs. You're experiencing adverse childhood experiences in this moment, but they do know what it feels like to feel safe, what it feels like to be seen, what it feels like to be secure. And that's what can fill up those white spaces that are in between that pyramid so that it is not a predestined path to early death, as the study first showed us. So I have about 5 minutes for any questions or that you may have, or any responses. I love how you guys are interacting in that with each other, but I wanted to leave just some time for you to ask. Yes, you've got to love the babies. You have to love them. Yes, Susanna, thank you for talking about the importance of school counselors on educating teachers and staff on the importance of building relationships. And what I've learned in my work in consultation with teachers as well as staff is we talk a lot with teachers and staff about taking care of children's mental health, but we forget to talk about teachers on how to take care of their mental health and how ACEs have impacted the way you show up in the classroom. It impacts the way I show up in the therapy room because of my parents being divorced, my dad being incarcerated, my dad struggling with drug addiction and alcoholism. All of that affects how I show up in the classroom every day. And if I am not aware of that, and if I am not building safe relationships and building up my skills that Patrick is going to talk about next, then I could be doing more harm than good. So it's focusing on our children as well as focusing on us as the helpers, as the teachers, as the counselors, because just like we say in play therapy, the adult is the most important toy in the playroom. In the classroom, the teacher is the most important tool in that classroom. So you got to take care of you too. Thank you guys so much for your time today. Oh, good question. If the intervention isn't early, say it comes in early or middle adulthood, can it still change the trajectory of physical and mental health problems? Yes, It absolutely can. Does it need to be more intense? Does it need to be more consistent? Yes. But it can absolutely, because our brains are plastic, because there is that neuroplasticity and they can change and they can grow. It may, again, take a little more work, but it can absolutely be done. Great question, Alicia. All right, Lisa, that is what I have. And of course, with my work, I have us ending on just a community breath together. And I just want us all to take a big inhale and an exhale. And I want us to thank each other for the work that we do, because we are all doing something every day to change the trajectory and to not make that ACE pyramid come true. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie, so much for that information. It was a great presentation. Thank you. Up next, Patrick LeBlanc will be talking about building up parents. Patrick LeBlanc is a certified trauma and resilience professional and a mental health first aid instructor. He's from Grambling, Louisiana, and is the executive director of Bridging the Gap Foundation. It's a nonprofit assisting underserved individuals access to quality mental health treatment options. Patrick is a community health educator for behavioral health at Parkland. He earned his bachelor's degree from Dallas Baptist University and a master's from Southwest Baptist Theological Seminary and Dallas Theological Seminary. Thank you, Patrick, for joining us today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm just so excited. I think I just experienced an ACE, trying to follow somebody like Stephanie. But Lori and Elisa, I again, thank you so much for the opportunity. Again, Stephanie is phenomenal, and I knew that when we were going to partner together. But again, as I said, I'm excited about being here. Try to get my screen up and running for you guys. I want to, Stephanie shared some unbelievable information about ACEs and how they got here, the effect they have. And so I want to kind of go now into how we can build up parents that may be raising kids that have ACEs, or those parents that may have had ACEs themselves, but for whatever reason, they were not addressed. And so I don't know how many people on the call are parents. Whether you're a parent or not, I think some of this information can help you when you're dealing with children that do have adverse childhood experiences. So I just want to talk for a few minutes. Anybody needs some help when it comes to this parenting thing or dealing with parents? Anybody? And if you want to share, some thoughts of what you might need, someone said all the time, what you might need help with specifically, as we just coming off what Stephanie just told us. I'm not a parent. Okay, all right, yes. What about dealing with parents? What about being a instructor? What about help with your students? I'm just winging the Mon thing one day at a time. You know what? I don't think that's a bad thing to say, because there is no parenting manual. Let's be real, conscious of that. There is no manual that we have to how we should parent. Dealing with parents is the hardest part about working with kids. Healing myself and my kids at the same time, very good. I know that parents, dealing with parents, you may need help with that. Hopefully some of this information can help you as well to how you can deal with parents. Because a lot of times we're going to notice as we go through this that a lot of times the things that they're doing was done to them. So they don't feel like it was wrong. It worked for them. So surely it ought to work for my child. Always good to know more. Okay. I saw a text. I have 2 strong-willed daughters, taking it one day at a time. That's a good approach with any child, not just girls, but it's going to be a one day at a time. Again, there's no manual. There's no manual. Of course, when you have parents, you do have to put that divorce component in there if it's on the table, because a lot of times kids do react differently. We're generally worried about our friend, be it the husband or the wife, but a lot of times the kids and how they're affected by the divorce is something that's not considered. All right, so I do want you to know that there are a lot of us, myself included, and it doesn't get any better once your children are adults. Sometimes it may even become a little bit more difficult to work with them. But when you think about how you were raised, how you're raising your children, or how you were raised, and now how you're seeing other people raise their children, especially when it comes to the school component, because a lot of times, if we open and honest, parents are looking for our schools to be our mental health providers. And so they are looking for the schools to sometimes, in many cases, do more parenting than they've done. So I want to this is a video that kind of is really going to piggyback on what we saw with Stephanie's last video. But I want you guys to look at this, and I hope you can hear the sound as this plays. If you can't, someone let me know.
Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, are an established set of 10 types of traumatic childhood events that are proven to have negative effects later in our lives. Half of the 10 ACEs identified are abuse and neglect. The remaining 5 have to do with family challenges or issues. Research from across the United States has verified a direct link between these ACEs and health outcomes as an adult. This is not a new idea. However, research has provided us with overwhelming proof childhood trauma does cause serious impacts to both our physical and mental health. The more ACEs a child has, the stronger the risk of having serious health challenges later in life. At the same time, many people show remarkable resilience in recovering from childhood trauma, changing their life path toward health and happiness. The ACE study is a powerful tool for informing and educating youth and adults. It's a call to action for all of us. Now is the time to work together to raise awareness, build stronger support systems, and prevent childhood trauma.
When I reflect upon ACEs in my life, I look back at my childhood and I realize that a lot of those traumas that I had that we now call ACEs really brought me down a path where I had really struggled as an adolescent. I dropped out of high school, ran away from home, got pregnant. Every parent's worst nightmare.
I grew up in a very strict family environment, also a very strict boarding school environment, as in Catholic boarding school, where everything was cut and dry. You know, you cross the line, no one ever asked you why you crossed the line.
I had a high number of ACEs. I had several things happen in my childhood that would qualify as ACEs. So I had that 4 or more kind of category. And all of a sudden it made me look back at my own experiences and think, oh, looking at my own parents, you know, as parents, they both probably had a few ACEs and adverse childhood experiences in their history too. My father definitely. And I kind of looked at him as a parent who, you know, he was definitely not a great father. But I also understood that he was probably being the best parent that he was able to be at the time, given how he grew up and what he had to go through as a child.
Growing up in a family that had experienced a lot of trauma together, there was a lot of emotional responses. We didn't talk about what those emotions do to us, or that they're normal, or that when you're angry you shouldn't be calling people names, or some of the other effects that emotions have on us. And when I found out about ACEs, what I found out was that I was normal, that other people that had the same experiences that I did made a lot of the same decisions. And I was able to really look at it as a part of a growing and healing process instead of a deficit or me being bad or me being broken.
It made me kind of reflect back on my parenting and what I did as a parent, what I maybe could have done differently. If I had had this information, what I might have done differently. And I think in particular with my oldest child, who is a product of my first marriage. So he went through a divorce, his father's an alcoholic. So I passed those, by making those choices, I passed those adverse childhood experiences on to him.
Well, I have to look at my two daughters when they were growing up. And I wish I had not reacted in some of the ways that I had reacted towards some of their behaviors, especially with one daughter who questioned authority. And basically, to me, that meant she was misbehaving. I have to be more understanding about what they do, what they say, how they act. I've become more tolerant of my grandchildren's behavior than I was before I heard about ACEs. I tend to talk with them now and not talk at them, which is what I did with my daughters.
The message I want to give my kids is bad things are going to happen. It's how you deal with those bad things. Going over with them, okay, what happened? And how were you feeling before that happened? If you're angry, what can you do with those feelings?
There's a couple of things that I found that have been really important to building that resilience for my children. And one is that simple things like we eat dinner together or we plan activities together. So we're continuing to build our relationship. I also make a point of letting my children know what they're doing right. As parents, we want to teach them, and sometimes in the past I have used criticism to teach them. And I really found that I want my kids to grow and grow stronger. So I really started focusing on those positive aspects.
Having a community of people around them who love and care about them, that are giving them those messages that they are loved and cared for and are worthy of that love. So surround themselves with people who can be supportive. I know that for me, I had a couple of teachers, a school counselor, those people who maybe only said something to me once or twice, but they said it at just the right moment, just when I needed to hear it, that I could do something, that I was capable. And you never know who that person's going to be or how they're going to be part of your life.
I think the most important thing about learning about ACEs is it demonstrates to us that as parents, and we don't have to be ashamed and we don't have to pass those ACEs on to our children.
Because I do feel like that knowledge of those experiences and what those long-term effects can be is powerful knowledge that you can then do something with.
We have to choose to do something different. We have to be intentional about making those changes because it won't happen on its own. I want to give my kids the best chance at succeeding in life, which means I have to do things different than my parents. So the choices that I make now are based on not what I was taught or what I'm afraid of, but what I've learned.
But first of all, people need to be, shall we say, need to be jolted, need to be awakened to, let's say, ACEs, for example. That, what has been transmitted, to our children, has to be transformed. Okay? And that transformation It has to come from the parents.
All right, what do you think? I mean, you think I really want to kind of focus a little bit on how the guy at the end mentioned about transformation and about what has been transmitted can be transformed. You think we can do that, or we can't do it because of how many ACEs have occurred, or it has had such an effect on the child that we can't? Yes, no. All right. I want to talk about this real quick. I mean, has anybody ever heard of this? Yes, no, responses and how reaction our bodies and how our bodies respond. Okay. Okay. First thing I want to kind of, talk about is this allostasis. And, some stress can be energizing. Stephanie talked about that earlier about, we were kind of, excited about doing this. And then, of course, we had a different kind of stress when the screen went dark. But some stress can be energizing and, toning to the system. So when you talk about allostasis, you're talking about a representation of how the body is interacting with the total integration of things that are going on in our life. And as you can see, there's stressors, there's adaptation, the body system adjusts well to different type of stressors without being overtaxing of the resources that the body has. But then there's this flip side of what we call an allostatic load. And this is when the body systems achieve a kind of balance, but they may be in balance, but everything is working too hard. And we begin to slowly break down. The wear and tear on the body, it accumulates after individual stressors, things that happen. And if we don't address those, then we have something else, and we don't address it, then we have something else, and we don't address it. I really like to use the analogy, especially in the fall of the year, when the leaves begin to fall off the trees. And you think about it, one leaf falls and you see it, and, we go over there and we pick up one leaf. But depending on how big your tree is, you continue to fall and fall and fall. And then now, this year, for instance, I had almost 22 bags of leaves when I finally decided to rake all of those leaves up. So as you can see, that allostatic load can turn into something that's real simple or real small, can become something that is really taxing on the body. So I just want to make sure that you're making sure you're taking stress response, and then stress reactions are just very critical to how we deal with it, because we're going to have them between work, between family, between life, people that we encounter, those we know, strangers we don't know. They're going to create us to have these different kind of stressors in our life. Oh, and I know you've heard this term over the years. I mean, it's been a big thing, I think, since the COVID started. Everyone is talking about self-care. So I definitely want to make sure we spend some time talking about self-care. It's a term that's been widely used in how we practice it. We want to maintain, enhance our short-term and long-term health, and just make sure our overall well-being is being taken care of. You have to always remember that if you neglect your own needs and forget to nurture yourself, you are in great danger of deepening that level of unhappiness. You'll have low self-esteem. You'll have feeling of resentment toward whatever the issue might be. So it's very critical. I mean, we need to be mindful of our self-care. And it's going to be said throughout my presentation. But one thing we need to understand, that self-care is not selfish. A lot of people think that. If you are tapped out because of stressors, you're not going to be able to take care of anybody else. So your time taking care of others is going to be greatly at risk or even diminished because you may become burned out because you haven't spent the time to take care of yourself. So I want to pause here, and because I know it's just a topic that a lot of people have heard of, and I really want, because of how my screen is set up, I can't see the chat, but I really want people to just either say, unmute, or put in the chat some things you do for self-care. Keeping in mind that self-care is not selfish. And Lori, if you maybe can help me what people are saying, that would be fantastic. What are you doing for self-care?
Taking time off is part of self-care.
Okay. Time off. Any others? I need some help because I can't read the chat. So I need someone to tell me what's in the chat. I see the numbers going up.
Exercise.
Exercise. Great, Reggie.
Disconnecting.
Disconnecting. I want to talk about that in a few minutes. That was good.
Meditating.
Meditating. Awesome.
Go out to nature, go out to the lake and walk around the lake.
All right, Sylvia. Love it. Yes. Okay.
Spa day, pamper day.
Oh, yes. Can't get enough of those.
I like movies and shows that aren't too heavy, like that don't make me think about work, that are just mindless.
Okay. Okay. Curl up on the couch with a blanket and some popcorn.
Spiritual meditation.
Love it. Love it. Can't get enough of that.
I see a lot of people in the chat.
Not having any plans.
Somebody said boundaries. I like that one. That one's like
setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay. I really want to talk about the disconnect. When you think about disconnect, I mean, that could have, I mean, that's very broad, but I think sometimes it's something that we need to, especially when it comes to our devices. We need to disconnect from that, but sometimes we need to disconnect from people. We need to disconnect from the situation. We need to disconnect from the environment that we're in. And I think we need to stop looking at it as maybe in a negative context or a negative connotation, because sometimes, again, we're thinking about ourselves. You're trying to make sure that you're good. And if you're not good, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to take care of someone. So sometimes, you know, let's just have a period of time that we put down our devices. We don't check emails. We don't Twitter. We don't FaceTime. We don't Facebook. We don't LinkedIn. We just kind of, you know, and it doesn't have to be a long period of time. For each person on this call, it's going to be something different. But as part of your self-care, I think being disconnected from all of the other stuff that we are connected to sometimes can be beneficial. So here's just some 3 things, little operation strategy that I'd like. First of all, you got to be kind for yourself. Give yourself permission to be kind to yourself. Someone mentioned the pamper, the spa day. It's nothing wrong with taking care of yourself. Ultimately, it'll put you in a healthy state of mind, and especially help you to work better with others who've had ACEs. A common humanity. Stephanie mentioned this, but we need to understand that ACEs are something that's common. It's something that happens. It's not an isolated incident, and it's happening more and more now that people are getting more educated and having the knowledge to know that this is something, or just what it was. So understanding that there are common humanities, and what we are experiencing is another part of self-compassion that we miss. So you need to understand that you're not alone. A lot of people think, especially a lot of parents think, that no one else is going through this, or I don't hear anybody else complaining about this, or, you know, why me? So I think a lot of times we have to understand that this is a common part of humanity. Then the last thing that I just like to do is just kind of practice some mindfulness. Be non-judgmental about your thoughts and about your feelings. They're yours, so you don't want to really beat yourself up. A lot of times it's difficult for people to understand how you're feeling if they have not been in that situation or those circumstances have not happened to them. So when you're not getting lost in your feelings, then you're able to step back and observe the situation with a little bit more unbiased, you know, view of what's going on. So don't be judging yourself, don't be beating yourself up. And I'm going to share a personal story here shortly, but I had to do that with my first child. I had to always, I guess, take care of myself because of how I beat myself up because of the circumstances surrounding her. So this is just a few things that I wanted to put. Anybody got any questions about any of these? Okay. Anybody heard of this? The oxygen mask rule? Thumbs up or whatever in the chat, that'll be good. I don't want to assume that all of us have been on a plane before, but you know they give you that debriefing before you pull away from the gate, and they always tell you to make sure that you put your mask on first before you try to help somebody else. Again, it's just another part of self-care. You want to make sure that you're doing what you need to do to take care of yourself before you can take care of someone else. I always talk about trying to pour into somebody. You can't pour into somebody from an empty pitcher. So if your pitcher is empty, there's no way that you're going to be able to pour into someone else. So the oxygen mask rule is something that is really good for us to practice, especially when we're talking about self-care, and it's something that's just mindful for us to be better in life. Okay, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, kind of two different things that kind of have some of the same issue. Compassion fatigue is, you know, you're just kind of tired, you're just fatigued, you have low energy because you are doing all of this to take care of other people, and you're just emptying it out yourself, you're just giving, you're just making sure. You know, a lot of times pastors have these experiences. A lot of times school counselors and teachers have these experiences. You know, a lot of the people on the call said they weren't parents, but you may be an educator. So you have, you know, 30, I don't know how many big the class sizes are today, but you have a large group of children that maybe you didn't birth, but now they're looking to you for that compassion. And you do that daily and weekly and monthly and throughout the semester and then the school year, you know, and, you know, that could result in some compassion fatigue. We talk about it greatly at Parkland where I work, because Parkland being the kind of hospital that it is, all kinds of traumatic things come into the ED or into the Parkland system. And so a lot of times, you know, my role as a community educator there at Parkland is to not just educate the community, but also make sure that the staff is taking care of themselves. Because again, the compassion fatigue, that vicarious trauma, not trauma that happened to me directly, but indirectly, I've experienced this because I see the trauma, I see the cuts, I see the car wrecks, I see the burn victims because of COVID. A lot of times when we think about trauma, we think about tornadoes and hurricanes and floods, but COVID has been traumatic for every one of us. So you have the trauma, then there's some indirect trauma. And as you can see from this picture, eventually, if you don't address those, if you don't have that self-care, if you don't unload those, then eventually you're going to burn out. There's a young guy that we're working with. He has a program he calls Trash Day. And I want you to think about this. Think about this. Every every week or maybe twice a week, depending on where you live, you gather all of the dirty paper towels, all the leftover food, all the stuff you forgot was there that now has turned into mold, orange peelings, banana peeling, dried up fruit, just trash, Q-tips, things you blew your nose with. You get all this trash in your house together and you bag it up and you put it on the side of the street. He calls it trash day. How often do you take out the trash in your life? Think about that. Weekly or twice a week, we make sure we clean out the trash in our homes and we put it on the curb for whoever municipality to come and pick up. What are we doing to take out the trash in our homes? I mean, in our bodies, in our minds. So you need to have a trash day so that we won't get this burnout. Okay, as we talk about building up parents, this is another quick video. They talk about the Triple P program. I don't know if anybody has heard of that, but I really want you guys to look at that. This is a program that has been used in how this particular, I think it's in North Carolina, and how they use what they use to help build and strengthen parents.
Things start at home. Everything starts at home for a child. A lot of times parents are faced with behavioral or emotional issues with their child, and they may not even be aware of some of the signs or some of the triggers or some of the tools or strategies that can be used to not only identify those issues, but then to correct those issues.
I think people think that, well, these kids are going to reach out to teachers and they're going to reach out to people that they trust, but they just don't. They've been told so much what happens in this house stays in this house. So these victims are very different than anybody else in the community because they don't have anybody.
The Triple P program, or Positive Parenting Program, is an internationally acclaimed evidence-based educational and support program for parents and caregivers of children and adolescents. It really is an attempt to further change the culture as it relates to those home environments, making sure that they're nurturing and that they're as conducive as possible for the successful development of children and adolescents in our community.
I really believe over the last 10 years that I've been involved in it that we have seen a culture shift with some entities, some groups that are beginning to recognize. And so I think there's this awareness that's on the ground floor. Hopefully that's about to rise up and become even bigger in our community.
We're approaching it from many different angles. And Triple P is just another angle or another tool, if you will, that our communities will be able to use as we attack that issue.
All right, he talked about Triple P, but the Triple P is just for a positive parenting program. And I think, I don't know a lot of what school districts can or cannot offer. I don't know if it has to be some kind of initiative within the PTA or whatever, something like that. But I think for the parents to have those kind of initiatives or something that's phenomenal. I wish that was the case when I told you I was going to share a story about my parenting, and my parenting lifestyle, as the first video talked about, was really instilled in me from how my parents raised me. Stephanie alluded to how ACEs occurred and the demographics that were involved in those studies. But, my parents were born in the 1920s in Louisiana, and I can only imagine the things that they endured. And when I came along, my father was like that guy. He was extremely stern and firm. And that's all I knew, because that's what happened to me. My daughter was born, my first child was born when I was 18. And again, no parenting manual. I had no idea what I was doing. And then complicated it that when she was 5 months old, her mother just disappeared. So now it's just me and her. And so, but through God's grace, we made it. But I'll never forget when she graduated high school and she left my home going to college, she called my home Shawshank. I don't know how many of you guys have seen that movie, The Shawshank Redemption, when the guy is standing out in the water in the rain with his hands up. She tells her college friends that's how she felt when she left my home, Shawshank. So I say all that to say, when we're trying to build and strengthen parents, we need to always consider the fact that there's some things that they went through, not knowing what we know today. So I think a lot of that needs to be taken into consideration when we are helping parents. So what we want to do is then we want to provide for those parents warmth, affection, and cognitive stimulation. This is something we want to give them that they can give to their children, because parents need to understand that the socialized children, we want to socialize children in a way that promotes a certain desired behavior. If we can pattern, if we can do this, if we can show them this, if we can show them this way, because again, that's going to be on the flip side. If we show them the negative, if they have the acers, those are the things that they're going to carry into their adulthood. But if we socialize them in a way that promotes a positive outcome or positivity, we're encouraging. I noticed the lady said that they have dinner together, they do things together. If we do those type of things, then we can get a more positive or more desired behavior from our children. So with that in mind, I want to talk about some simple things that we can do that we can improve our mental health. And as we're going with these, I'm going to talk about each one of them, and as you can see the 5 here, but I want us to take some time, where we can, I guess, go into detail to talk about each one of them in more than just what you see on the slide. So one of the things that we try to do, with the kids, but also with parents, is we want to look at what's positive. When it comes to our mental wellness, never underestimate the power of positive thinking, okay? Your outlook can influence how you feel. Even when things get hectic, think positive. As difficult as it may sound, we need to try to find some kind of positive in that. So I just want someone to kind of let's just talk about how we can look at those positive things real quick. Parent or not, at the school, things that we may see. How can we do that? Put it in the chat, or you can unmute and talk. Is that hard to do? Okay, look for what's working. Good point. A lot of times we're so quick to point out what's not. We can't do this. We can't. Look for what's working. I really like that. Good. Someone else.
I just wanted to say, looking for the strengths, and that can be, a child that talks in class. The strength is communication. So looking at everything that we do and looking at it in a different way can actually turn it around and spin it around to a positive.
Okay. All right. Like that. Thank you. Someone said offer encouragement. Always. We want to make sure we do that.
How about the child that arrives with mismatched or shoes on the wrong feet? Praise that they tried to put them on.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times, we get so focused on pointing out the imperfections that we kind of, miss the effort. I think that's great. And then it also creates an opportunity for us to show them, to teach them, to empower them. So great. I totally agree, Marshall. Great analogy of the shoes. That's great. That's great. Someone else.
I think normalizing some of the behaviors that children experience because of their child development or because of the situation, and just normalizing that all parents feel frustrated and at their wits' end sometimes, and just offering that empathy.
Great, great. Normalization is a very good technique, but I do like the last word that you said, empathy. We need to always try to put ourselves, and thank you for sharing that, Kelly. We always want to make sure, when we think about empathy, we're kind of putting ourselves into their space or into their shoes or into their circumstance. And a lot of times, if we can do that, that can kind of give us a better outlook or a different outlook on what's going on. Always come from a place of understanding and compassion, and be genuine and offer assistance. Thank you, Dominique. I think when you think about understanding and compassion, is something that sometimes we don't have, but the one key word that I do like what you said is genuine. And especially going back to one of the stuff that Stephanie mentioned, when you're dealing with these children, but also I think when you're dealing with the parents, I think they know. And I think we're deceiving ourselves if we don't realize that they know when we are genuine. Or are you just saying this because this is your job? Or are you just saying this because you're the school counselor? But do you generally have, and I know it's tough because we don't want to get too close or too connected, but I think we still can show some genuine care and empathy without really getting too involved. Okay. If a child is struggling, try to get them to know that, okay, good. You know what, and that's very important. A lot of times, all they can see is May the 6th, 2022. You can't ask them in a lot of cases, especially the younger, where they see themselves in 5 years. They can't see past May the 6th. So I think that's real good to just understand and help them to understand that it will pass. So, okay. All right, so we can go to the next one. Stay physically active. Now, talking about parents, talking about you as adults and educators, a lot of times, we get home because of work, because of life, because of everything we had to do. I am just exhausted. I do not have time to go to the gym. I'm not going to get on somebody's treadmill. I'm just not going to do it. But you need to make time to stay physically active. Being physically active is good for you, your mind, not just your body. It releases mood boosting endorphins that provide a relaxing sensation throughout the body and the mind. People who stay active on a regular basis often enjoy reduced stress, anxiety, and depression. Notice, walk for half an hour 5 times a week. Put that on your schedule. Now, with life, a lot of people think school is not a full day. As a counselor, and I'm sure you have staff development, you got bus duty, you got things you got to do after school. But I'm encouraging you to make time where you can be physically active, that you can do something intentionally. Walk to a park, walk up your street. If you have an animal, maybe take that dog for a walk, or take the cat out. I don't know how you can find ways. Everybody on this call is going to be different, but I do want to encourage you to get physically active or become more physically active if you're not doing that. Does anybody find this difficult?
I sometimes think the motivation is hard.
Why would you say that, Ray? What makes it hard? Life or time constraints, or?
I think for me,
okay,
as a school counselor, I'm mentally exhausted. I'm mentally exhausted on top of all the things that are going on here on campus. on top of being a parent as well, and finding that time to disconnect from what happened at school, as well as I have to be fully and intentionally present as well for my child. So I think that that's where I'm having the problem of being able to disconnect, to say, okay, I need this time for myself as well.
Okay, Susanna. I saw someone put in the chat, have an accountability partner. I think that's a good idea, but I want to talk with, address what some of the things that Susanna said. Would a time, or, and I'm not saying that yes, I mean, you tell me yes or no, or I'm just a suggestion. Would time, a walk with the child, I don't know how old the child is, would that be something that you guys could do together, and something that could also give them that physical activity? And yes, no, possible?
I would say so. And I think that, like someone said, accountability. I have to give myself accountability, because you mentioned something about COVID, and I noticed for myself, I was very active before COVID.
Yeah.
Completely back and forth at the gym twice a day, whereas now there is zero physical activity.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that COVID thing, I told my wife we're going to start wearing our mask indoors, to put a mask on our refrigerator or something. So
yes.
Yeah. Okay. By getting a pair of shoes, Warren said getting a pair of shoes would help. You know, yeah, you kind of want to make sure your feet you got the right equipment. But I just really want to stress to you guys, it does so much more and it is relaxing. It'll help you to sleep, because now the body, you know, has kind of, you know, released some of that stuff. You're a little bit more relaxed sometimes after a workout. And you got to think now, we think about 30 minutes a day. And I mean, sometimes that could be maybe walking to one end of the street and then back to the other end of the street, but just something to make sure that you are doing it. Yeah, okay. Alicia put when her young son had his scooter, she would walk or jog. Okay, and they could do things at the same time. Again, I think those kind of things are just things that can help us to better deal with some of the stressors that we are dealing with. The other one is to eat and sleep well. So we just talked about the refrigerator, having the mask on. You know, look and see. You see what section they are in the store. They're not on the snack aisle. They're actually in the green vegetable produce. The ways in which we take care of our body influences our mental wellness. Hello. Okay. Maintaining a healthy weight can reduce the likelihood of feeling of anxiety, depression, or irritability. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your mental health is to get a good night's sleep. Most doctors are recommending about 7 to 9 hours per night. I'm totally not doing that. I don't understand why, but 3:30, 4:30, I'm up. And sometimes I can lay there and doze back, but most of the time I can't. So I'll just get up. So when I was working with a young lady, and she was saying that, Patrick, I don't have any children, so it's very hard to cook meals for one person. So I know heard some people on the call said they didn't have children, and so you think, yes, that's true. Okay, you know, but even with that, I think we want to make sure that we're not doing too much processed food, too much junk. Lori, we want to make sure that we're still eating healthy. You know, salads, not that many dressings or the right kind of dressings, but we want to make sure that we eat, because, you know, let's think about it. We just talked about being active. And then now we're not active, but we're eating not the best. That's going to cause us to have some weight gain, some unhealthy outcomes. Aline says she gives her extra to her neighbors. Good idea. You know, find someone, maybe a senior citizen, someone that you could share the food with. That's good. And what about sleep? Okay, meal prep is a good way. Preparing, you know, are we getting that recommendation of sleep? Yes, no, 6 hours, 7 hours, 8. Sleep is severely underrated. Okay, most people are saying, yeah, you're getting that amount. Lack of sleep, especially when law. Oh, yes. Yes, we'll talk about that offline. I think I've seen all 2,000 episodes of Law and Order. So yes, yeah, Jack McCoy, that's my guy. But yeah, we need to make sure that we are doing what we need to do to sleep, to get adequate sleep. One of the things that I heard in a presentation I heard, do not sleep with go to bed with the television on. The bedroom is not the place for TV. That's not what it was designed for. And so a lot of people don't have TVs in their bedrooms. We don't have them in our guest bedrooms because when our children come, we don't want them to get too comfortable and stay. So we didn't put a TV in there. But you want to make sure that when you go to the bedroom, you're going to the bedroom to sleep. 5 to 6 hours of sleep. Okay. Husband playing 2K. Let's just be mindful of the fact, you guys are something. Let's just be mindful of the fact that what the bedroom was designed for was for us to have rest. Okay, let's get moving. You guys are awesome. All right, so breaks. Again, I don't know how you do this. I know we had a lot of school counselors on the call. Life is hectic. Between work, family, social responsibilities, stress can get the best of everyone. Sometimes the greatest thing you can do is for yourself is to take a break. Going back to earlier, I can't remember who said it about us being disconnected. If you find yourself overwhelmed, set aside a few minutes for you to meditate. I know sometimes when I'm at my job at Parkland, I will leave my desk and I'll just take a walk around the atrium at the bottom. I'm just walking. I had to get away from this. I had to get away from it. I'm doing mental health presentations. I'm hearing all this stuff about what's going on in the ED, dealing with secondary trauma, employee going through this, and then social injustice, life, traumatic stuff that's going on. Sometimes you need to do what you need to do to take a break. Do you find it easy or difficult? And I know with the school counselors, I mean, I don't know, again, I just know that, I don't know if you guys can get up and walk away, because I know between the responsibilities, academic, people coming to your office, administrators want to see you, but can you, if you can think about it, can you find ways where you can just take a few minutes to just sit back and just meditate and just focus on things? Yes, no?
Sometimes it's hard. I have to leave my radio in the office if I really want to do that, but then
you're not supposed to.
I leave the radio in the office and all of a sudden a fire is happening. Not an actual fire, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. Okay. And then you leave there and you go home, and of course now you have the home responsibilities, the child, family, whatever. Let me encourage every one of you guys, try to find time. Try to find time when you can. It is so critical for you to be able to take those breaks. She has to hide. Okay. I like that, Stacy. Stacy says she lives close, so she go home for lunch every day, and that's great. That's fantastic. Just getting away from the situation. That's why I wanted to really. I knew this was coming, but that's why I really wanted to talk about or focus on that piece about being disconnected. Sometimes we just have to get away. All right, we got one more here. And now when you're talking about again, we're right here, we're talking about strengthening and building up parents. And sometimes, as we mentioned earlier, and Stephanie talked about, this could be the cause of some of the ACERs. But when you're talking about the family unit and those people that are close to you, companionship is good for our health. Please understand that. It benefits mental wellness in several key ways by increasing the sense of belonging, having a sense of purpose. It can boost the happiness and reduce the stress. It can improve confidence in your self-worth. but it also can help you cope with the trauma. My sister is a teacher in Aldine ISD down in Houston. And I think weekly, or at least maybe every 8 or 9 days, her and a group of teachers go to, I call it Happy Feet. They call it happy hour, because I'm not a drinker, but they do this. And when I call her and she's there and she's telling me that the reason why they're there is because of all the stuff they've had to deal with parents, with the with students and the administration, and they just need to go and spend some time with some people that know and can relate to what they're going through. Okay, choir practice. Again, that's a good environment. Visiting my hometown is nothing like going home. Okay, Lori, I like that. A lot of people, and thank you for saying that, because some people may not have that great relationship with family and friends, like Lori mentioned in her comment. So I don't want you to, going back to my sister, we have no other relatives in Houston. So it's just the two of us. Both of our parents are deceased, but she's got a network of people around her that are now, close enough to her. Some of them have come here when she comes to visit me, and when we go there, we'll see them. So, but absolutely, spend time with your family and friends. Lori also mentioned a great idea, a morning devotional with some classmates. I think that's also something that's great. You just want to make sure that you're finding the necessary time that you need to be with other people to have that interaction. All right.
I think it's also hard with COVID sometimes.
It's always what?
Hard with COVID.
Yes, yeah, and that may, again, back to the traumatic event, and that changed all of our lives. We were isolated. We didn't have that interaction, even with family. Even last Christmas, they were saying, should you not? Good point, Ray. Good point. A lot of times it did make it very difficult for us to do that. Good point. So you just need to know that parenting is very hard, very, very hard. It's hard to find a balance in the middle of the chaos. So as a parent, I just want to encourage you, Susanna and the others, get the rest whenever you can. Real quick, here's some things that SAMHSA has, kind of defines our wellness. They're all interactive here. When we think about our emotional coping with effectiveness of life, creating satisfactory relationships, our finances, social, developing a sense of connection, belonging to a well-developed supportive network, our spiritual, whatever that is for you, occupational, physical, we talked about the activity, intellectual. You need to be around people that make you think, read books, take time, and again, getting out. And I can't remember who it said, talking about just enjoying environment, enjoying health, good health, by occupying pleasant, stimulating environments that are well supporting of your well-being. I think we all can relate to this. You would not let this happen to your phone. Don't let it happen to you either. Self-care, again, it's not selfish. Questions? Melissa?
Well, thank you for sharing your wonderful presentation with us, Patrick.
Okay.
At this time, we will take a break. Use this time to connect with others in the chat box or get a snack, go to the bathroom. We will reconvene promptly at 10:45. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. If you have turned off your video for the break, please feel free to turn it back on now. Up next, Patrick LeBlanc will rejoin us to talk about understanding positive childhood experiences. Welcome back, Patrick.
Thank you, Lori. As we talk about, ACEs, and then, a lot of times that's what a lot of people focus on. And even when we're talking about the parents, we really want to talk about that or include that. But one of the things that Stephanie and I had really talked in depth about is positive childhood experiences, which is something that does not get a lot of emphasis. simply because, you know, we're focusing on the things that have affected the child in a negative way. And that goes back to when we were thinking about look at the positive things. Sometimes it's hard to do that because all we see of the negative, or the negative stands out, or as a society, we have just been conditioned to maybe pay attention to those things more than we do the positive. But one of the ways that we can help parents as well as the children is to look at those positive childhood experiences. And so what we're going to do in this section is really kind of just focus a little bit on that. We're going to, you know, PCEs are what they're called, but we want to spend some time and we're going to talk about, so I'm going to need for you to really jump in and help me with this, because this is where we can be really interactive with one another. A lot of times, Stephanie and I were talking as we were preparing this. This is just so much better when we're face to face, and hopefully as COVID continues to get better, we can do that. But we're going to just look at some positive childhood experiences and how those things can really have a better or a different outcome on the child, even if the child has already been through some adverse child experiences. So, you know, when we think about these things, you know, again, this was some data that was in 2015, but how the PCEs protect adult mental health. Studies found that positive childhood experiences show a dose response relationships with adults and their relationship health. What this means is that how we're exposed to ACEs, those that are exposed to more positive childhood experiences show better lifelong mental and relational health than those that have fewer positive childhood experiences. So again, as you see, 0 to 2, the odds of depression and poor mental health compared to the 0 to 2, and then 3 to 5 is 50% lower. 6 to 7 is 72% lower. So positive childhood experiences buffer against the negative lifelong health effects caused by the ACEs. So it's kind of like a good word there is that buffer. It's some things that can transcend, can transpose, can transition from that negative until something positive. And so you notice how if we go back to that first video that I showed, the parent was talking about eating together. When we were talking, someone mentioned always encouraging the kids, applauding their efforts. I've been thinking about that analogy about the shoe being on the wrong foot. We want to do what we can to make sure we are encouraging those children at any opportunity that we can. So here we have a family unit, and you know, a lot of times you heard on another video they talk about what happens in this house stays in this house. So with that being said, here's a positive childhood experience: the ability to talk with family about how we are feeling. So I kind of want to just pause here. You can unmute yourself because, you know, I don't want to try to read the chat. Do you find this difficult? Start with yourself maybe, or if you think families, culture, other things make this difficult to happen.
I don't think it's primarily difficult for it to happen. I know a lot for me personally. I grew up experiencing some childhood ACEs, and I said once I have my children, and I do have my own 2 daughters now, I try to do things different than how my parents did with me as far as being open with communication. So I always try to spend a few moments each day with my children and ask how their day was. Great. If they want to express anything, you know, get it off their chest and just to vent and get it out instead of holding it in like I did for so long growing up as a child. And so I think the more that we, or I do that with my children, I'm able to break that that gap or generational gap that I know a lot of African American families have, and I'm African American, and so I think a lot of times I grew up with that. Don't talk, don't talk about it, don't tell our business, don't say anything outside of the house, don't talk about it. And I grew up with that, and that was quite emotional trauma for me. So with my children, I try to just definitely have a conversation or two each day and take a minute out of my day to hear how their day went. And I think that's been helpful, both of my children, because they always let me know that they appreciate me spending some time with them and asking them about how they feel. So I think it just takes the initiative to actually start doing it.
Okay, thank you, Delisa. Thank you so much for sharing. Because I think one of the things, and I saw another young lady, I thought she was getting ready to talk, and hopefully you'll hold your thought to come back. But let's just look at this picture right quick. The first thing that I think we need to understand is why this may be difficult to accomplish is because realistically, how many of us sit down as this family type unit to have a meal or have an opportunity, or we're all in the room? Now we're together maybe to watch the game, we're together to do maybe some other athletic events, but in this type of setting, this may or may not be occurring across the demographics that are on the call today. Another thing that Delisha just mentioned that I want to talk about is culture. As she mentioned, I was the same way. There were certain things that you had a place that you had to be constantly reminded of. If you didn't were reminded of, they reminded you that there was a place that you have where you didn't say this or you didn't mention this. So again, there's that cultural impact. But as we look at these people around the table, this family unit around the table, where they're look like they're having a fun conversation. In most homes, with families that we are connected with, is this happening?
No.
No. Absolutely. So again, that makes this, kind of difficult, but I think we can't lose sight of, we need to make sure we're encouraging that positive childhood experience. They need to know that they have the ability to talk with families about how they're feeling. Delisha made another good point, because if they don't, and this is not just them, this is you. If you don't find an avenue to unload those feelings, sooner or later, you're going to be like that, those 22 bags of trash that are on the curb. Anybody else want to talk? Yes.
Hey, Patrick, this is Sylvia.
Hey.
Hey, what's missing is the cell phone.
Okay.
Parents get stuck on that too. We always think the cell phone is with the teenagers and with the kids, but the parents are doing it too. So it's hard, but it's called modeling. And we got to let go of that cell phone. It's been so, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think everybody on here would agree. Again, I just can't help but think about, and I hate I didn't catch her name, but the person that talked about being disconnected. When we did this as a family unit, 2 kids had graduated and we just had 2 left, and we were like, okay, there's no place, or the cell phone doesn't have a place at the table. And that was a conversation talking about feelings. There was a conversation right there, just trying to get through that. So thank you, Sylvia. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Felt experiences that family during some supported difficult times, we need to have that sense of I guess support. The things that a lot of people don't understand is when let's go back to COVID, a lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of people lost their homes. If my home gets foreclosed on, my children's home got foreclosed on. if there was a fire in an apartment complex. Okay, so how do we allow them, or how do we be supportive of them when there are difficult times? Because they're going to have them. I mean, you know, life is going to occur. That's why I love when Stephanie exposed me to the different layers or the different faces of ACEs. But when we have difficult times, what are some ways that we can be supportive that are felt by those children?
I think first off is validation.
Okay.
Validating their feelings, validating, you know, that they're experiencing that. And based on my experience as a child, validation did not exist. So
Wow.
I think giving a child the moment to express themselves and saying, I understand, or I may not understand, but tell me what it looks like, or tell me what it feels like.
And I think that's excellent, Susanna, simply because of the fact that you could look, or you could give an assessment, but until the child does that, how do you really know how the child feels, what's going on in the child's mind or in their body, until they have that ability to validate? So I totally agree with you. Thank you for sharing that. Somebody else, being supportive.
I think that educating your family, and I can speak from this. My dad's side were Native American, and they they don't talk about their feelings. They do more when I'm there because they know I'm gonna insist on it. But and with that, I've had family members struggle with mental health, and I get called in to help kind of walk through it, even though I'm not clinical. I've just been in this field for so long. So I think the education piece of it, or continually talking about mental health and how we can support each other, and that it's okay to say, and I'm plugging that tagline, but it is okay to say, and to and doing all this with our family, it has educated and enlightened other family members that just didn't understand mental health and didn't know that it didn't mean necessarily that they always need to be in the hospital, that things can be worked out through therapy and or medication.
Okay. Thanks, Laura. Someone else was saying something?
I think that silence is perhaps underrated. We're very prompt to want to put a name on it or encourage the child to put a name on what it is. Sometimes just sitting alongside in silence, giving them an opportunity to not be overwhelmed and come up with their own view of what's happening.
Okay. That's very interesting, because you're right. I mean, and I'm speaking from experience. I'm very guilty of that, because you feel like there's a need to respond, or as a parent, a need to fix it. But sometimes I think, Sheila, you're right. We need to listen. I mean, or be quiet and just sit there. And I like a guy, I thought about something just when you said that. He said, we just need to be present.
Yes.
We just need to have a sense of, and our presence is supportive during that difficult times, and not thinking that we have to rush in and fix it. So thank you for that. Anybody else? Supportive.
This is Delinda.
Okay.
Delinda, thanks. I think it's kind of on the same line of what they were saying before, but with my family, I always provided a safe place. So I wanted my children to know that if they came and talked to me about those things, that it was coming without judgmental. You know, I wanted them to truly know what their emotions were, and I wasn't going to judge them for the way they felt or how something affected them, so that they would talk to me so I could help them work through it.
Okay. And that's one of the things that I learned as a mental health first aid instructor, that's one of the first things that you want to do, especially after there's been a traumatic event, is to always create that environment or that sense of safety, because we really can't start back to healing or start back to getting better if we are not, we don't have a feeling of being safe, or in a safe place. So thank you for sharing that. Great, great, great. Somebody else, I love this. Somebody else. Being supportive. Okay. Okay. I like that. And this kind of goes back to the young lady that was talking about silence. Sometimes just a hug. Just a hug. Again, you know, we think we're coming out of COVID, we were isolated, no contact or limited contact. I don't know about you guys, but you know, I'm a relational type guy, and that's how my children are wired because of me. You know, in Louisiana, that's what we do. We just don't speak. Hey, how you doing? It's always involved a hug. Sylvia knows this. Lori knows this. These people that see me at different events, you gonna get a hug from Patrick. That's just what we do. So thank you for that. I mean, sometimes just a hug, and then if you put the silence in there, again, that sense of support, that sense of connectivity, of connectiveness with someone, a great way to show support. Okay, Lori, you make it relate, but environment and participation in community traditions. We ought to have quite a bit of dialogue here. Positive childhood experiences, getting them connected to traditions in the family, traditions in culture. You know, we're coming up on Juneteenth. Yesterday was Cinco de Mayo. You know, we have Hispanic Heritage Month between September 15th and October 15th. You know, 4th of July may be it. You know, Mother's Day is this weekend. Environmental and participation in community traditions. Let's talk about that. How can these things be positive, especially, let's say like Lori, she was talking about when she goes back to her family, but how can these things create a positive sense of experience for those children? Anybody?
Just spending that time together with family and friends.
Okay.
Could be a positive experience.
Okay.
Seeing, you know, togetherness and seeing other families model the same behavior at those events.
Okay, good. I want to, Andrea, I'm going to just share an experience. I went to Grambling State University, as she said. Every November, there's a huge football game in New Orleans called the Bayou Classic. And it is not your average college football game. I don't care if you went to Alabama, Texas A&M, I don't care, Georgia, Florida. There's nothing that can compare to the Bayou Classic. And so we always wanted to, because our kids, you know, they grew up in Arlington ISD, which was pretty much diverse, but we wanted to always make sure that they were connected to their heritage. Historical Black colleges and university. So their senior year, we would take them to that. We went, but we would take them to that game. That wasn't the only time we went, but we would make sure whoever was a senior that year, they would go and they could bring 2 of their friends. And so we basically would get them a room, you know, make sure they were okay. And we tell them what time we're going to leave on Sunday. And a lot of times that was the next time we saw them. But the ride back from New Orleans to Dallas was just, oh, I saw this and daddy this and they did this and I didn't know it was like this. And, you know, I just can't believe this. I mean, all these experiences that they saw just being surrounded by that historical Black college experience. It was a way that they didn't encounter that in Arlington simply because of the diversity that was there, but it really helped them connect and have a better connection to, you know, where they had come from. So I wanted to share that, but when we go home, I thought I saw someone mention about where they grew up. I take them to see my grandmother's home that's there, and the place where they were born, and just so they could see again where things we did. We have a Mother's Day crawfish boil. We haven't had one for 3 years because of COVID. So everybody's excited about the crawfish boil coming up this weekend, and those kind of things, helping them to get that positive reinforcement of things that we feel they need. So I'm going to stop and let someone else see what's here in the chat, but let someone maybe share something that you may be doing. Food can be a great way for people to get to hear. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, PV. Anybody else?
I think storytelling with older members of the
yes.
family.
Yes, 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 yes. Storytelling, great.
I don't have a story to share, but just a caution,
Okay.
because I grew up and because a lot of my traumatic experiences stemmed around abuse from family members, I had the tendency, or I just cut my family off. Not all of my family, but that extended family of cousins and some of my uncles. It was just I didn't want to be around them. But as I dealt with that trauma and learned to accept the person that I was at that time because of that trauma, I was then able to start taking my children around my family. And I got to see how, regardless of who your family is, they're there to support you the best way that they can. And I hate that because of the things that I hadn't dealt with, I didn't allow my children to have that experience when they were really young, that the supportiveness and the togetherness, the connectedness, the sense of belonging, you're okay, this is where you come from, this is what you're made of. I hate that they missed so many years of that. But on the reverse, I'm so thankful that I got myself in a position where I could expose them to that. And now that they're adults, they're free to make connections with, the cousins that are their age, and they don't have that traumatic experience from their families.
Oh, Chanel, that's wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable, because I think, one of the things that I would like to say is, first of all, I'm grateful that you made it through that, and now you're a productive citizen. You had your own children, and now you may be creating, back to that first slide that we had, where you are, able to talk through feelings. I mean, I don't know how much of that you shared with them, but you want to think about, it could be now you guys are creating some new traditions, some things. My children never met their paternal grandmother. They never met her because she passed, but at a certain age, we loaded up the car and did that 8-hour drive to South Louisiana, because I just wanted to know, like you just said, this is where you come from. And they were just totally shocked and in awe, because, Daddy, y'all used to spend y'all summers down here. I couldn't have done it, and not me, and all these other kind of things. But I just told them that if it wasn't for this little shotgun house, you wouldn't be who you are. So Chanel, I think it's an opportunity to create some more. I really like the fact that you said that now they're adults and they can make the decision and the choices to who they want to connect with. So again, a great way to start maybe some new traditions. So again, thank you for sharing.
This is Belinda.
Okay.
My father was adopted at a very young age, and there's always been controversy behind that. But that's just the background of the story. He's been dead for about 9 years now, and last year I received a package in the mail, and it was letters that his biological mother had written him. That his I guess the woman who adopted him had kept. And anyway, in the process of all of it, they got to a cousin. The cousin felt like she should share it with me. the beauty of that is that my children never knew my father was adopted. It was just something we didn't talk about. So they were learning about his childhood and everything through these letters, because there's a couple of letters where he wrote her back and some exchanges, some pictures, and it was fun to see my kids open their eyes to, not only was our grandfather all these great things, but he also had this other part of his life that we didn't know about. And so it really taught me too about like where he came from and and stuff like that. So it's been great for me and my children both.
Great. I mean, and I think that thank you again, Delinda, for sharing. But that's another way, again, I think, of just showing and exhibiting how when we explore and again, just knowing where you've come from, how that can be beneficial to just how we can grow and move past. Because those, again, it's a positive. Evidently, we weren't sure how it was going to be, but evidently, it looked like it was a positive childhood experience for your children to be involved in that. Okay. All right. I got a lot of school counselors on here, so this is something that I think is, and I shouldn't say, but I think it's not discussed enough. But the feeling of belonging in high school. The first thing I want to do is ask, and again, is it difficult for them to have that sense of belonging? And if so, why? Anybody, school counselor, please.
I mean, for me, it was difficult because, as a high schooler, or feelings of belonging in high school and family, my parents were immigrants of this country. So then again, it's a big difference. But then I see the children that are at my campus now. I have refugees, and I also have students that cross the border. And we all know that crossing that border is not easy. And hearing those stories and trying to figure out how to belong in this new country, learn the language, at the same time missing home. I think that that's one thing that's hard for us to understand and to be able to help them with, but giving them community here on campus, bringing them in. Because of course, before, like we go back to COVID again, we couldn't have that sense of community because they couldn't even come to inside the school to see what school was about, when in their country, they may have never had school.
Okay. Someone else, a feeling of belonging in high school. I just know, I think about, while someone is getting their thoughts together, I think about, I'm in Duncanville, I live in Duncanville, Duncanville ISD. We have one high school, and there are 5,000 students, or more than 5,000 students at that school. And I'm just like, wow. And so when you think about things like this, a feeling of being, of belonging, among 5,000 plus students. How can we make this a positive thing for these students? And I'm saying school counselors, but anybody.
What are we doing to embrace their culture? That's another thing, embracing their culture. You just stated Duncanville ISD. That's where my husband went to school. He went to Duncanville High School. I went to Irving. So we had more high schools than Duncanville. But how do we embrace culture? How do we embrace diversity, being proficient in it, and being intentional about it?
Good word, because you're right. There are multiple cultures, and that goes back to the slide we just had. I mean, what's important to them may not be important to this person. So good point. Someone else.
I think the teacher shortage has not helped with students trying to connect. I know in the high school, sometimes our students are trying to find themselves and figure out what they want to do as far as college or career or things like that. And sometimes teachers will take them under their wing and connect them to those people in the community. And now that we're having a shortage I think that's really hurt them with being able to find that person that they can lean on from time to time. And, now we're having younger people going into the field and they're not staying. So I think that's really affected our kids.
I would totally agree with you, but I want to, again, find the positive in that. You made an excellent point. When they find a teacher or someone that they can connect with, I love how you said that can take them under their wings, that can kind of nurture. Remember, we're talking about adverse child experiences as opposed to positive child experiences. So now in adverse child experiences, I don't have that sense of belonging. I don't have that connectivity at home or in my community. So guess what? I find that at school. And so now I'm connected. So Ms. Mona, you're right. I think that is going to be a detriment to some students, depending on the size of the school. But I do think it is a positive experience when they can find that person. And a lot of times the kids find it with their coaches in athletics, but they also find it with the drama teacher, or they find it with a teacher that's passionate about their favorite subject. I can remember, I played football in college, but I loved math in high school. And Miss Mildred Cummins, everybody hated Miss Cummins because of how she was as a teacher. But I loved going to Miss Cummins' class because she saw my passion for math, and we just had that in common. So in the midst of the shortage, I think we need to understand that having that positive childhood experience with that teacher that can nurture, that can be supportive, that can encourage, that can just be present, I think it's something that could really help them have a sense of belonging. Anybody else? I'm clicking.
I think after COVID too, the whole socializing thing really took a hit. And as a counselor, I see a lot of kids and teenagers that struggle with learning how to socialize again and being a part of a group and not on electronics over, trying to socialize that way. And they're so anxious. I've never seen kids feel as much anxiety as they do nowadays. And so a lot of times I encourage parents to find some sort of way for them to socialize, not just at school, but outside of school. So in some sort of extracurricular activity or a sport or anything. I mean, anything at all, just to get them, outside more and socializing with others more than they have been, just because they've lost that skill. And even if parents are involved in that, that's even better. But if they can't be, or if it's just not easy for them to do that, just having them be a little bit more interactive with other people.
Excellent, Kelly. Excellent. I think socialization is a huge part of their development. And I think everybody could agree with that. So again, the 2.5 or the 2 years with COVID really, set a lot of kids back. So again, socialization is a way that they can help having a sense of belonging. All right. Okay, now, as we get into this, let's again think about ACERs, because sometimes their friendships can create an ACE. Sometimes they can be kind of brutal in some of their language and things that they do to one another. So as we're talking about positive childhood experiences, I want to talk about them having feelings of being supported by their friends. And again, we have to really keep in the context of the ACE. When we talk about positive childhood experiences, this is something that, again, it's a fine line, because a lot of times they may or may not have it. So I want to talk about just how we can help them or create it, those positive or those supportive friends. And let's think about some of the stuff we've talked about: disconnect, relationships, how we spend our time. In most cases, again, we're on campus, parents Are yours being or having a sense of feeling supported by their friends? Or is it more adverse than positive? Anyone? I hope that doesn't mean they're more adverse when it comes to their friends than positive.
I think in my case, like with I have a daughter who's very socially awkward. She still is as an adult. She's just really socially awkward. But she joined the drama team or department when she was in high school, and as socially awkward as she is, she's awesome when it comes to doing plays and one act, speeches and stuff like that. And she remembers that even as an adult. And so if she gets in a situation where she feels like she can't talk or she feels, she'll remember being in that drama class and how open that made her feel. So, I think it was a real good thing for her because it shown her that she can open up in the right environment.
Okay. And again, thank you so much, Delinda. You made me think about a situation while you were talking. You want to make them have, I think that being comfortable, having a sense of connection, as you said at the end, made her open up. I'm thinking about today, this afternoon, there's a young man that I have been a part of his life since he was, I think, 8th grade. He has a developmental disorder. He's 27 years old now, but his mind will never get past that of an 11-year-old. And he, at first it was, again, a single mom. She just needed someone to be there to help her with her son. But now, because of that relationship, I get a call every other month. When we going to the movie? Marvel, the Avengers. I mean, you could think about these childhood type cartoon movies. That's what this 27, today we're going to see Doctor Strange, the new movie by Doctor Strange. That's where his mind is as an 11-year-old, but he's 27. So coming alongside, being supportive, it gets him in an environment where he talks. We'll go to the house for stuff, and he is just quiet because number one, he thinks he's 11. He has a place where he doesn't talk, but if he sees me, he will not shut up. He just will not shut up. And so, again, having that supportive environment and so I don't know now if I'm more of a friend than I was a mentor, but again, just coming alongside him is something that I think is really making his life a little bit better. So again, having that support. Thank you, Delinda. Okay. And this kind of, goes back, follows up to what I just mentioned. A lot of times for the children, a positive childhood experience is having at least 2 non-parent adults who genuinely care. And that's something that I want to try. And that could be a teacher, that could be a coach, that could be that drama person, that could be somebody at the Boys and Girls Club, that could be a next door neighbor that maybe watches the kids until that parent gets home. But again, this creates that positive experience. Further discussion about the young man, it never fails. I'll get a call tonight when we get home from the movie, and his mom will just give me all the details that he comes home and tells her that we did this, that we did that. And, he calls me Pastor. Pastor was scared, and Pastor hollered out, and things that he'll see me, he's watching, and it just exhibiting the joy he had by us going to the movie. So with COVID in consideration, now that it's better, and just community, how we are as a culture, you guys think this is possible? Is this something that can occur?
I think it is possible, but it's helping parents and even the kids and teens themselves to be able to know where to find those resources at outside of school or outside of home. I think that's the biggest hurdle there.
Okay. Outside of school, outside of home. Okay. Could be difficult. And I think a lot of it is maybe because of the dynamic of the family. It could be because it might be a single mom. I know I'll go back to when I told you when I first came here, my daughter was 5 years old. It was just me and her. And I just wouldn't have made it if I didn't have neighbors, a lady around the corner that had some young children close to her age. I had to have that support system. So I agree it can be difficult, but I think it's something that we really need to be mindful of, that is something that can help them experience that. And here's why. A lot of times, because of the parent-child relationship, back to that very first slide, I don't know if I can share this with mom. My daughter, she didn't want to share it with the warden of Shawshank, but she would tell Michelle, the lady around the corner. So you want to make sure that, again, they have those people in their lives that can really, I want to go back to a comment I saw sometimes, we talked about genuine, we were talking about friends. Friends may not be friends. You want to make sure that these people are going to really treat these kids in a way that's going to be positive and influential in their lives. Okay. Again, mentioned this earlier, feeling safe and protected by an adult at home. Positive childhood experience. You got to think, when you think about an ACE, you can think about the domestic violence, you can think about the child abuse, the child neglect, all these other negative things that ACEs may occur. A positive, just to flip that, a positive is to make sure that they're safe, that they're protected by somebody there in the home. And one of the ways we can know this is not happening, that the child may not want to go home, or the home is not a good environment. So I don't really know how we, from an outside perspective, can do this, but you just need to know that this is one of the ways that they need to feel it can be a positive influence on their life. So we may not can influence it in someone else's environment, but I do want to just have some little dialogue briefly about how we can make sure that we've created a safe and protected space in our own home. What's some things that we can do?
I know that when I was younger, there are drop-in centers and stuff, and refer the youth to, and just know that it's a positive space for them.
Okay.
Making sure that we're communicating well with our kiddos and leaving the door open for them to feel free to communicate with us.
Okay. Lines of communication. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, you can go ahead, I'll wait.
I was just going to say, lines of communication is critical. I want to thank Kelly for saying that, because first of all, we have to, I think, verbally tell them that, I'm here, we can talk, feel free. I don't want it to be any secrets. I want you to feel, just say, I just want you to be safe. I want you to be safe. Dad is here to take care of you. I think, again, just communicating that first, because a lot of times if we say it and then we demonstrate it, it has a little bit more affirmation. Go ahead, Reggie.
I would say consistency.
Oh, yes. Awesome. Yeah, because I think that's something that a lot of us take for granted, that when they see it happening over and over and over and over, then now that kind of solidifies it in their framework that, yes, this is a place that's safe. That when I need that parent, I need mom, when I need dad, they're going to always be there. Excellent. Thank you. Somebody else. How can we do this?
I work with with parents of children who are 3 to 6, 0 to 6, but
Okay.
mainly 3 to 6 who display a lot of unacceptable behaviors. And I feel like since I've been in this position, the number one thing that I have stressed to parents is just that feeling of felt safety, and how some of our children who are displaying behaviors, it's usually a result of some traumatic event that they don't feel safe. And being safe is not what we feel as an adult, that our house is protected or we're in a safe place. It's that past experience coming together with that present experience. And do I feel safe in my body? Do I have a gut feeling that you're going to take care of me? And I love that slide that you had on response versus reaction, because so many times it's making the parent aware that a lot of times we are reacting to things. And when we react, we're in our downstairs brain and we're reacting the way we've seen our parents react. So we're unaware that we're triggering our children because we're in react mode. But if we can get in a mode where we can start responding and, open ourselves to being educated and being aware of what we've experienced and how it affects us and what we've been taught and how we've carried those things on, a lot of times unwittingly, but we just naturally react the way that our parents reacted. And we need to get in a place where we're comfortable and we feel safe in our ability, where we are no longer triggered by our children, and we can be a safe place for them. So it's a lot of going over that just felt safety.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Because you're right. I mean, let's just think. I mean, hopefully everybody has some good experiences at home, but I know that when I get on the road and I'm going home, they just could not understand, even though things weren't as great as I guess looking back they could have been, but I just love to go home. I mean, and as the closer I get to down I-20 and then I get down I-10, the closer I get to home, it's just that excitement is just because it's going home. So I always want to make sure that they have a sense that when they come here, that this is their home. This is like their nest. This is where they can get the nurturing and the recharging that they may need because they're coming home. So thank you so much for sharing that, Chanel. One more person, real quick. Anybody want to talk about how we can create that positive childhood experience at our own homes? Okay. All right. Okay. So I want to summarize the positive childhood experience. And the word here, it mitigates. It may not take away completely, but it will mitigate the effects of the ACE and then buffer against any toxic stress. And thank you for mentioning the slide about the allostatic and the allostasis. The positive experiences will mitigate the effect of the ACE. Positive childhood experience promotes healing and recovery. Positive childhood experiences promote healing and recovery. Positive childhood experiences promote healing and recovery. Again, the ACE has occurred. We don't want them to live or to have those lingering effects of that ACE. So now we want to start getting them on the road to a better life, better healing, to what and all they can and should be. So again, healing won't start until we first acknowledge that there have been some issues. But now, with every mental health, recovery is possible. Okay, I want to kind of open it up right here for any questions about anything that I did, or maybe even something that's my contact information, that's Stephanie's contact information. I just really wanted to just open up right now for any kind of question, dialogue as we get ready to wrap this thing up. that anybody may have for me. I think Stephanie had to leave. She had another engagement, but I'll try my best to address some of the stuff. We've worked on this for a while, but hopefully it's been something that has enlightened, has encouraged you, not just in your careers, but also maybe at home, some ways you maybe can address this thing from a different way. ACEs versus childhood experiences and how we can build our parents up. So Lori, Alyssa, questions, anybody?
I want to
All right,
thank you, Patrick. I want to thank you for everything. It's been a great presentation. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Sylvia. Always appreciate you. Mona, Tiana, thank you so much. It was really something that was not just eye-opening, but you know, Stephanie and I have worked together before. Again, that's why I was able to be very transparent. I think about, someone mentioned vulnerability and sharing some of my own stories. We talked about that as we were preparing this, you know, because I was like, should I not? But I just want to let you know that this is something that's, when you think about being common, it's something that is happening among more people than we would think. So I just want to let you know, don't think because you see all these books behind me that I got it all together. But I've had some issues myself. So thank you guys. Thank you, Sylvia.
They want you to go back to the email address slide, Patrick. Could you put that back up there so they can?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Patrick, for sharing that valuable information with us today. We appreciate your passion to help others and to be willing to be on this call all morning long. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of both of our speakers for sharing their valuable time with us today. I hope the input they have shared with us today helps you to walk away from this workshop with a sense of empowerment and hope for our community's youth and families.